quilting friends, it's Carolina Moore, your favorite sewing and quilting YouTuber, and today I'm going to answer a question that nobody's even asked me, but I think you're going to want to know the answer to this one. And the question is, what do you do with all those squares that you cut out of corners with the box bag template? You ready? Let's get started. Alright friends, if you're not familiar with a box bag template, I'll toss a link right up here as well as down below to the box bag template so that you can find all kinds of information about the ruler that I invented that makes bag making so much easier. But today, we're not talking about bag making, we're talking about random 2-inch squares. I'm going to start laying some of these out. I've been putting these in a bowl just for a day like this, and oh, some of these are smaller. So the smaller ones we're going to put aside for another project another day. But these 2-inch ones are what we're working with today. Doing pretty good. I think I'm doing pretty good. Oh, tiny ones. Okay, so I want to grab my iron and get it somewhere between wool, silk, and cotton. And then I'm going to use this stuff. Now this stuff comes on a bolt, and so it looks like this when you get it at the store. And it is, and I'll put this right under here. That's not going to, you're not going to be able to read that. It's going to be blurry. Okay, so this is what the end looks like, and I'm going to read that for you. It's, I think it's Bosal or Bosal, B-O-S-A-L. If you have a different pronunciation, let me know. This is a polyester rayon. And this one is 2-inch quilter's grid, which is why I'm using my 2-inch squares. It's a fusible 2-inch grid for watercolor and Bargello quilting. And what that means is it's a grid that has a 2-inch line on it. And I'm just going to press some of these because they're a little not flat. And it helps when they're flat if we're going to do this. Okay. That's better. So I'm going to take these, bring this over, and I'm going to unfold my watercolor grid. Now it comes just like fabric does, which is like 40 inches wide. So it's a nice, good size. So I've cut off a piece. Let's see, where's my fold? So here's the fold. And I'm going to lay it out with the bumpy side up. Oh, looks like this got a little close to my heat of my iron. That'll happen sometimes. Just had to tug it apart just a little bit. And this is just a really lightweight interfacing. The idea is really to add no bulk to the fabric at all. And now we can take these squares and we're going to lay them just on top of the grid, and you want to lay your 2-inch squares inside the 2-inch grid. Now the bolt said this is for Bargello and watercolor quilting. So if you wanted to get super fancy and do some kind of gradient across this, nobody's stopping you. You absolutely can. Kind of do like a from dark to light. I'm just going for Scrappy. These will probably be placemats, I think. I haven't decided yet what I want to make with my Scrappy squares. They might be a quilt at some point. I haven't decided. I just know that I have these squares piling up, and I can take these squares and turn them into fabric, and then that fabric can be anything. It can be a placemat. It can be a bag. I could totally make a super scrappy looking bag. Since these were cut at 2 inches, they're actually going to finish at 1.5 inches. So they're going to be these itty bitty 1.5-inch squares when they're sewn up, because yes, we are going to sew this up. Yeah, they're going to be the cutest little 1.5-inch squares, and that's going to look really impressive. People are going to say, oh my gosh, did you sew all that? And here's what you say. You say, yes. Yes, I did. I did sew all that. Whew, it was so much work. But if they're a quilter, then you say, come closer. Let me tell you the secret. And then you tell them about 2-inch watercolor grid. So they'll have this at your local quilt shop, or if not, ask them if they'll special order it for you, because it's fun stuff and it's inexpensive and really the fastest way to turn your little scrappy squares into usable fabric. So we can just keep going. Just going to keep adding these pieces. Making sure. Now I'm doing all of them right side up, but if you wanted some different interest or lower volume, you could actually do these wrong side up to give a kind of a different interest. You could also pick out your darks and your lights and do like a checkerboard between darks and lights. We already talked about you could do a gradient. You can use this however you want. This part is just laying it out, and all I'm doing in laying it out is that I don't want two of the same fabric right next to each other. And also I'm trying not to have two of identical kind of colors or values too close to each other. I don't want it to read as like a block of more than one. And if you have directional fabrics, you may want to pay attention to what's the top or what's the bottom. I am not. There's no direction, rhyme, or reason on this one. It's just fun. Okay, so this section is about the size of my mat here that I'm using. I'll bring this into frame a little better. There we go. So I don't want to go any bigger than this. And you have a couple options. You could iron directly on this. It's a little risky if something shifts. I'm going to be using, this is just like a non-stick paper. This is parchment paper. You could also grab a tea towel or an old piece of fabric and lay it on top. You just don't want the fabric to shift underneath your iron, and you don't want your iron to come in contact with that interfacing, because that interfacing will melt all over your iron and create a gunk. And we don't want gunk on our iron. So I'm going to peel this up, and you might see some spots where it's not perfect. And by not perfect, I mean like you might see where it might overlap a little bit or have a little bit of gap. Don't worry, you're totally fine, because we're going to sew these together. And so we have a 1/4 inch seam allowance around all 4 sides. So a couple threads apart or a couple threads overlap, it's not going to make a difference. Okay, so this looks pretty big right now. It's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. It's 14 by 14 inches. But remember, each one of these is going to take out a 1/2 inch. So it's 14 by 14, but this is 1, 2, 3 inches that are taken out. So that goes from 14 down to 11. And then there'll actually be a 1/4 inch taken out when it's put into something. So this is a 10.5 inch finished block. If I add one more row, then I can add another 1.5 inches, and then it'll be a 12 inch finished block. So I'm going to do that. Having a 12 inch finished block feels a little more useful, and if I continue making these over time, I could make a bunch of 12 inch finished blocks to put together. Okay, this one needs a little press. She's She's been stuck in that little bowl for too long. Okay. So I'm going to add another row around the outside before I trim this up. You can go a little past the fabric when you fuse to make sure that all your edges are fused. Corner here that's tucking under. It would probably be hidden in the seam allowance, but since I caught it, I'm just going to fix that. And then these two tucked open. Do that just with the point of the iron to get those tacked down a little bit. There we go. Okay. Get my iron out of the way. I'm going to move all these extra squares. There we go. Those I can use for another 12-inch block. And now I'm going to trim this up with scissors. And if I trim on the dotted line, let me flip this over so I can see it better. If I trim on this dotted line right here, what that'll do is mean that I can still use this piece. If I were to cut down the middle, I would lose these squares, and I'd rather still be able to use them. So I'm just cutting on my dotted line. And if I know in the future that I'm going to want to make 12-inch blocks like this, then I'll cut my strips of the interfacing to, what is that, 3, 6, 8. So I need 8 by 8 to make my squares. All right. This extra, I'll just cut that off as well, just while I'm at it. And it's okay if you see a little daylight between the pieces. This is, I mean, it's going to be 4.5 inches wide. I don't know if that'll be much, but I might use it for something. So I'll set it aside and decide later if I want to keep it or toss it. All right, I'll go ahead and leave those edges there. They're not hurting anything. And now I'll sew. Now, when we sew this, we're going to fold it in half along one of these dotted lines, which should be pretty easy because it should want to fold along those lines. And we're just going to sew seams. So this is super simple. It doesn't matter which direction you do first. Just pick a direction. So horizontal or vertical, it's fine. Starting in the middle, starting at one end, also fine. And we can sew the whole row at once. And you want to kind of be able to find that dotted line just in case your piece has got a little over to one side. You do want to be able to kind of know that the fold is on that dotted line. There we go. So now I have one of my seams sewn. I'm going to keep doing that all the way down. You can stop and admire your work. This one has now been sewn on both sides. How cute is that? Next one. Done. All the rows in one direction. And you can see this used to be square and how much it shrank because of all those 1/2 inch seam allowances, right? So that's our 12 inches now wide. We need to do the other side. But if we were to go, I mean, we could press, well, we do need to press it first, but you would end up with these weird seams here. So the way that we avoid the weird seams is we get our scissors and we're going to clip the interfacing, and you don't want to clip, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you clip your thread. You want to clip right up to your threads. Okay, and as you cut these, you're going to want to make sure that you cut through the thread. Now, you have a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so don't cut more than a 1/4 inch, but just cut up to the thread and through the thread so that it'll make your job much easier when you go to do your final press. It's also super easy for a beginner. And here is what we need to do. We need to press this way, that way, this way, that way, and press them back and forth. So you ready? This way, that way, this way, that way, this way, that way, this way, that way. And then, for fun, we're going to press them either toward, apart, toward, and I don't want to undo what I've already done, apart, toward, apart, toward, apart. All right, now this one's apart, toward, apart. Tuck my sewing machine out of the way. There we go. Already did that one. There we go. Okay. And we'll press this from the front as well. We just want to get them going in the correct direction. Oh, and I can turn this up a little bit for... There are 3 things that matter when you're dealing with interfacing. It is the amount of time that you press down, the amount of pressure that you use when you press down, and the amount of heat that you use when pressing. And I'm not giving it a lot of time, and the heat was lower than I thought. I had turned this down. Okay. You went the wrong way, and you went the wrong way. So we're treating these like shutters when we press them. in that this has closed shutters, open shutters, closed shutters, open shutters, closed shutters. And this one has open shutters, closed. Oh, that one's the wrong way. Closed shutters. It's a little finicky. It might have been something for my mini Aliso, but I had this one out, so. Last one, open, closed, open, closed, open, closed, open, closed. Now I want to lay it flat. Feel those seams, yep. And I'm going to press it from the front. And I'm just giving a tug on it a little bit to open up any seams that might have gotten puckered a little bit from my going back and forth with the iron. Okay. Hopefully those are all, mostly, more or less. There's a couple that they'll be fine because we will adjust them as we sew. All right, so if you guessed that we're going to sew the seams in the other direction, so we've done vertical or horizontal, and now we're going to do horizontal or vertical, then you're right. You guessed correctly. Good job. Easy peasy. Same as the other way, we're going to fold it, but this time we're going to double check our seams, and we can nest those seams as we go. I can feel those seams nesting beautifully. It's a little more to keep track of with the nesting of the seams, but there we go. One down and from the front, one down. All right, next one. Now, if you wanted, instead of going open, closed, you could have gone right on one row, left on the other, or up on one row, down on the other, depending on which direction. So you could have gone, put each row in one direction, and then the other direction, and then one direction, and then the other direction. That's absolutely a valid choice, but this is going to allow us to reduce the bulk a little bit when we finish, do our finished press, our final press. And since there's that interfacing, and it is a very lightweight interfacing, but it's still adding bulk because you have 2 layers of fabric at each seam plus 2 layers of interfacing. And normally we just have 2 layers of fabric. And if you were to have 4 layers of fabric at an intersection, that would be 4 layers of fabric, which is already a lot of bulk in general. And then you add on 4 layers of interfacing and you get a ton of bulk. So we would prefer to do what we can to get rid of that bulk. Okay. Come here. So looking from the front, see how those are turned? Like you've got these rectangle, and this is a little bit smaller rectangle, and these ones have all been sewn in. So those are your cute little squares. See how cute and scrappy that looks? And if you wanted to make them like certain colors, like, okay, these are my peaches, these are my greens, you could cut several pieces of this interfacing and then just add green squares. When you have a couple green squares, you sew them on. And if you have a couple of red squares, go grab your red piece of interfacing and add them on. And then make a bunch of 12-inch blocks that are each kind of like a color, a pixelated version of a single color. And if you do this with your scraps and just cut them into 2-inch pieces, you can use your AccuQuilt to just cut those scraps. You can use your AccuQuilt to have kids or grandkids cut your scraps into 2-inch pieces, and then you can actually put them at your ironing board, put the grid down, and have them lay out these pieces on the grid. And then depending on their age, you can iron it in place for them. But they've cut the pieces on the AccuQuilt and they've even laid it out. And all you're doing is pressing and sewing. But it's their design. They've picked out the fabrics, they've cut the fabrics, they've laid out the fabrics, and you're just doing this final stage of sewing. And again, depending on their age, they may even be able to do the clipping between the seams too. Alrighty, last seam. These go together really quick. And I know I said I was thinking about making a placemat with this, but I'm changing my mind. I think this would be really fun to use between my 12-inch. So I offer a free 12-inch quilt block to my newsletter subscribers every single month. If you're not already a subscriber, I don't know what you're waiting for. Go to the link down below and become a subscriber. Anyway, so I have all these 12-inch, oh gosh, it's like over 30 12-inch quilt block patterns that I offer for free. And it would be so fun. And they're all so different, but to checkerboard those between some scrappy squares. So scrappy square, quilt block, scrappy square, quilt block, and then do a checkerboard of scrappy and the quilt blocks. I know it might be too busy. All right, I can move the sewing machine out of the way because we're done with her now. Okay, so these have all been sewn and now we're ready to press. If you went ahead and cut through all the threads, then these will just pop open like it's their job to be able to spin the seams. And you're gonna have the prettiest looking back ever. So let me get my iron and I can start pressing these. Okay, doesn't that look so much fun? I'm just gonna flip it over and I'll give everything a good press on the front. Make it nice and smooth. And now this can get squared up to 12.5 inches. And I can put it with 12.5-inch blocks. I can make a bunch more of these and sew them to each other. But I now have this perfect little grid square. Right? How fun is that? Super scrappy, super easy, without having to sew a million seams at all. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, leave those down below. And make sure you're subscribed to this channel so you don't miss any more fun and fabulous videos. Thanks so much for watching, my friends. I will see you right here real soon. Bye for now.